everyone, this is Nikki of Nikki Hearts Cards, and today we're going to look at making some masculine Valentine's cards. I have two boys and a husband, and so they do not like the pink frilly, purple, red, all of that stuff on their Valentine's cards, and I figured there's other people who are struggling with some ideas for this too. So we're going to look at this Apron Box Card, and I'm not going to make it a box. I'm actually going to cut this die apart and make just a flat card for my husband. So I hope this will inspire you. Make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons, and we will get right into how I put this card together. I'm going to give you a quick sneak peek of what it looks like so you can see where we're going. And I wanted to mention while we're looking at this card that I'm part of the upcoming Card Maker Success Summit where I teach a class. Part of that summit is free and part of it is paid. There are freebies associated, so I wanted to make sure you know my link is in the description below. If you're thinking about attending this, please click through my link and get on the waiting list. I would appreciate it so much. That's coming up in February. So we're going to use the brand new magnetic Pro Deck from iCrafter, and that is this blue thing that has magnets in it. So it is a self-healing mat. So we're going to put our die down on it and cut directly into it versus using our cutting plate. You'll see that I still use a cutting plate, but that's partly just to make sure I've got my sandwich correct here. So the sandwich that I'm using is the plastic shim, one of the cutting plates, and the magnetic Pro Deck. My cutting plate is very warped, which is part of the issue with a Gemini. So its pressure is so hard that it tends to warp plates. So I'm going to do lots of checking with this magnetic Pro Deck, and I'm going to keep you guys updated on how it's doing. But right now, let me just show you how well it cuts. So perfect cut. And I'm going to lift this magnetic Pro Deck up so that you can see that I don't see any marks in this, which is amazing because remember, you're cutting into your deck. You can kind of see that outline, barely, but it really did not mess this up, which I am so amazed with. I'm going to go ahead and show you all the die cutting that I did so that you can see the pieces, and then we're going to do some ink blending and cutting the card apart. So I used this silver from Lawn Fawn and did the same sandwich that I did before. I usually flip my top Gemini plate over because it is warped. I kind of try to do it differently each time. But what I really love about this magnetic part is I'm not having to use tape and nothing is moving, which when I use my warped plates in my Gemini and I don't tape things down, sometimes I will get some movement. So this is the last thing I believe that I die cut, and it looks beautiful. And you can tell this paper, because it has a pattern, I wanted to make sure everything was lined up and very even, and nothing moved. I lined it up, kept it very even, nothing moved on this, which is amazing because I want to keep my stripes perfect and everything even, because you can tell that a little bit more with the pattern. So I think all this looks great. I don't have any things in that mat. And then this is the back piece. So if you were going to build a box, you would use this whole piece, but we're just going to use a portion of it to put behind the apron, and then I'm going to create a pocket with this cutout and another cutout, and we will have a cool little pocket that kind of pops open to put our utensils in. Here's that back piece. I'm going to cut right along this line, but I'm going to keep that piece and use it as part of the pocket. So we'll cut that with our trimmer, and then we'll get started on ink blending. One thing that I want to talk to you about is getting your colors to match pattern paper. So I sometimes will start with a color and just blend on top of it if I need to add more. So what I started with here, which I forgot to film, sorry about that, the bottom layer is the Distress ink, so not the Oxide, but the Distress ink of Prize Ribbon, and I thought that would be the appropriate color, and then I realized no, it's not quite what I want. I want a little darker than that pattern, so I decided to come in with chipped sapphire and go over that Prize Ribbon ink, and you can do that. It mixes them together. This is a different color than just plain chipped sapphire sorry, chipped sapphire, and it really makes a difference. So I do a lot of holding that paper up to see if I'm getting close on my color. And then I love to go back in, especially on a masculine card. I don't know why this makes a difference, but I love to go back in with even darker around the edges. Like I'll use on this one, I'll end up using some black soot around the edges as well. And I think it just gives it a good dark weathered, and it almost makes it look shadowy around the edges. It just really looks good on the card. So let me show you how this color compares, and we'll look at that. So I was going for darker than the actual blue in this, but still a color match, and I feel like that really worked well. So we're going to go ahead and do what this little flap was the extra part we cut off the box card, but we are going to do it the exact same way. I tried seeing if I could just do chipped sapphire, but the color is off. So you really do need the prize ribbon if you're using for the color that I was using. It's just not the same color. So I decided to go back in with the prize ribbon distress ink like I'd done previously and use that on this little piece. I am keeping the fold on the bottom because I feel like that's going to help it stick out, but see how those colors are different? The prize ribbon really does add more blue to this color, so I'm going to add that in. I'm going to use a different brush, so I've been using my little eye crafter finger brush, but when you're using a distress ink, you should really use a different brush than what you use with your oxides. They are a different type of ink, and it makes a difference what kind of brush you use. I'm going in with that prize ribbon. You can see how blue the prize ribbon is, and you can even see in that area, just with the chipped sapphire, it's going to look amazing. I really only need the edges of this because I'm going to put some pattern paper over it, but I went on and did the whole thing just because sometimes I get a little carried away with my ink blending. So I've done the chipped sapphire all over this color now, and I'm going to add a little bit of black soot on the edges. And the reason, like I said, it really makes it stand out. This is going behind, it's kind of like the back panel of the pocket. My black soot is very juicy, so I don't know why, it just came that way. So I always tap some off, and the nice thing about this kind of media mat is that you can reuse those little areas. You're really not using a whole lot of ink, and I'm just trying to make the edges a little bit darker so they stand out and make a little extra dimension on this piece. Last bit of ink blending that I do is on my Kraft cardstock. So I tried Vintage Photo and it didn't seem to be quite as dark as what I wanted, so I've moved to Gathered Twigs. Just remember, you can do multiple layers and still work with it. That's one nice thing about ink blending, is you can always cover it up with another color if you're not so sure about that color. So this piece of Kraft Gathered Twigs may not work on yours if you've got a really light piece of craft paper, but for me this one worked great because it's a little darker. And so what I'm trying to achieve here is just adding some interest to the front of the card. If you go and you do some darker around the edges, it almost makes the middle of the card look like a spotlight to me. So I really like that look on my cards, and so I'm going to get this card base finished, and then we're going to move on to how we put the card together. To show you, so I cut this out of craft paper, and you could leave it that way, but I really like adding some kind of wood grain look to this roller pin. I think it just matches the back of the card, and so I'm just kind of coming in with some stripes that kind of follow the curve of the rolling pin, and I'm using E13, and then I'm going to come back in and make a little bit darker lines with E23. So this will kind of soak into your paper and just make some subtle effects, but I think it really does make a difference on what you're doing and how it looks. And with this rolling pin, only part of it's sticking out, so I'm just kind of making some quick little motions here and only doing this upper half of it. Now let me show you how I put the apron together. So remember, we've cut several pieces out. I'm going to add some of this plaid that I cut out with one of the squares in the die, and I'm going to add this to the front of what's going to be my pocket. And the pocket that I'm making is coming from the extra piece we cut off the front of this apron. I don't know if you remember that, but we've die cut it. We cut it off with a little trimmer, and now it's going to end up being our pocket. So first I've got to add this plaid part of the apron. See how good that looks. I love the ink blending behind that. I just think it looks amazing, and this makes it pretty easy to line up. There's, you know, kind of embossed lines, so you know exactly where you're going with that. And then we're going to add the pocket. So I'm moving it around a little bit, just make sure it stays flat, and you know how that flap is there, that's going to give us enough room to stick all of these things in. So the flap on the bottom, that's why I kept it so this pocket would stick out a little bit. I capped up my glue because I'm going to use an actual piece of strip adhesive, and the reason is that that sticks out a lot. I need it to stick out just a little bit to fit my things, but not as much. And I also need the sides to be attached. So I'm kind of taking this tape and going around the edges of this pocket. Normally I'm a glue adhesive person, but this one nice thing about using a plaid with lines is that you can line up your double-sided adhesive a little bit easier. So one reason I use glue is so that I can move this around and make sure that I've got it placed right. But as you can see here, you've got lines to go by, so it's a little easier to place your item when you're using some type of pattern paper with lines like this. And you can adjust a little bit with your adhesive. I'm going to make sure that the window stays open so that I can stick my little utensils down in there, and then we'll get those ready to go. So I'm trimming off the utensils so they don't stick out too far from this pocket. You can kind of measure using your pocket. And now we'll go into our final part of the pocket, which is going to be this heart. This comes with the set, and I'm going to Copic color this so that the middle hopefully has a little bit of highlight in it. So just using two colors, I'm going to use the R22, and that's going to be my middle light color, and then my darker color is going to be the R29. I love this color red, and I think it's going to really look good with the blue that we've chosen. This is going to go on the front of my pocket. I'm not going to put a sentiment on the front of this card because it is for a guy, and I just think it's kind of self-explanatory. It's got a heart and it's got the little apron on there, and I'll write a nice note in the middle. One quick trick, especially for me with coloring with reds, to me it's a little harder to shade with reds than any other color. So a lot of times I'll take my colorless blender in here and make more of a light area and then go back over it with the R29. And that a lot of times will make this area highlighted. You can do this with any color that's lighter. So I could still use that R22 if I wanted. I just knew it would make more of a statement if I really erased some of the color and went back. So that's what I did, and I think that makes it kind of glow from the middle. Now it's time to put this card together. So I went on and attached some chunky twine, and that's from Doodlebug up there. That's kind of like the apron strings, and I taped it to the back of this. Now I want to arrange my utensils in this pocket. I'm going to use liquid adhesive when I put those in there, but I'm just trying to get everything arranged and make sure they don't stick up too far on my card. And then we're also going to need to put the heart on the front of the pocket. So we'll get all of that together, and then we will be pretty much done with this card. So with this heart, you could do something like glossy accents over it. I just felt the look of this card lends to less sparkly effects, and I know that my husband really likes cards that are like this versus having a lot of glitter or sparkle. So I'm trying to make this a card for a guy. So I taped this little chunky twine to the back. Because that chunky twine sticks up a little bit, I'm going to use some foam tape to pop up this element, because if not, and I try to glue all that down, then the top of the apron is going to stick up a little bit because that is so, it's got a little bit of height to it when you lay it down. So I'm just adding some strips of foam tape, and then I'm going to put this down on the card, and I'll show you what it looks like. So here it is, foam taped to the back of this card. We still need to add our utensils. I would say with utensils, I'm using liquid glue, but I'm using a very tiny amount because you don't want that to slide up and get on the rest of that silver because it's going to show up. So I kind of use my fingers to peel up the pocket, and I'm going to use some tweezers, and I'm going to stick this down in there. Sorry, that's a little bit off camera. But I'm trying not to get any adhesive up on this part. And of course I got just a little bit, but I'm working on that. So this one will be a little easier because it is a piece of card Kraft. It's not as worrisome to get the glue up on that. It doesn't show up as much as it does on something metallic. So I'm going to put this one in, put the other one in, and then we'll talk about this final card. So here's the final card. I feel like this is a great card for someone who doesn't like sparkle, but also for all of our masculine Valentines we need to send. My husband doesn't like those frilly ones, and so I'm going to make this as his card. He loves to cook. I think it's a great idea to use this iCrafter apron box for this, and I will be using this die a lot more, so stay tuned. Make sure that you hit subscribe and like, and go through the description for all of the things that I used in this video. Those do give me a small commission at no cost to you. So I'd appreciate your support so much. Have a great day. Bye.